Great to be here with you, Amy, today. And
Yeah,
we're going to talk a bit about our own story about growing up with divorced parents and how now, later in life as adults, we're reflecting on that and we're starting to notice, or we have been noticing, how that's impacted us. Amy and I have known each other for many years, but what's funny is we've never actually sat down and talked about our parents' divorce and what it was like and how it impacted us. So we're just going to kind of talk through the questions that I have in my webinar, which is how to talk with a friend about your parents' breakup. And so Amy and I are just going to model that as we talk through the circumstances of our parents' breakup and how that's impacted us. So does that sound good, Amy?
it does sound good, and I'm excited to hear some of your story too, because
Yeah.
even though we've known each other for years, it's
Yeah.
something we've never
Yeah.
talked about.
I think is so common and so
Yep.
strange and yet so common with a lot of people that I talk to. Let's just start off with the basics. So, Amy, I'll let you go first. Maybe tell
Okay.
me a little bit about how old were you when your parents broke up, and then kind of what happened after the breakup. Who did you live with? Did you see each parent? What kind of happened in that regard?
I was really young. I was four. And it was a significant time in my life because it's right around the time I was diagnosed with cancer, aggressive cancer called Burkitt's lymphoma, and was not expected to live. Um, and so that was kind of the scene
Mhm.
of what was going on in my life. I was living in Alaska. My mom and I, or my mom and I, and my grandfather sometimes would fly from Alaska down to Seattle to Children's Hospital for my treatment. And I'd be there sometimes for weeks, sometimes for a weekend. A little bit foggy as to when my dad left in that, but I know he left right when I got cancer. Like it seems like at least that's the story kind of my mom rehearsed with me is when I got cancer is when my dad left. I
So
was
then after your parents divorced, who did you live with? Did you see your
okay.
parents or kind of what was that like?
Yeah, so there were four of us. I had three
Mm.
brothers. I was the
Okay.
third. We were close in age. There were four of us within 6 years.
Okay.
So boom, 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 boom. I was the third, three brothers and me. We all lived with my mom. So my dad moved out. I remember him coming back a couple times, maybe. And then I remember him being in an apartment in Anchorage. The first memory I have of him being in the apartment, he was living with his girlfriend, Vicky. So the arrangement was we lived with my mom
Mhm.
and we saw my dad occasionally. It was a messy situation. I know my mom didn't make it easy. She was really hurt through the whole situation. She went back to, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, there's a big alligator right outside my window. Can I stop for
Yeah,
a second?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold
Sorry,
on, I'll be
everybody. You'll
right
just have to
back.
wait.
And I saw this guy on the grass by our little lake here. I'm standing. She went back to teaching after my dad left. She was
Mhm.
staying at home before that, had to go back to teaching. And then we saw my dad occasionally, maybe a couple weekends throughout the year. And then often it was just two of us at a time because my mom said it's too much for him to have all
Mhm.
four of us at the
Mhm.
time. And, it was just, yeah. And so, but sometimes four of us went. It just
Yeah.
depended on things. Didn't see him a lot, even though he lived in the same town.
Yeah, for myself, I was 10 when my parents split up, and I had no idea that they were having a hard time in their
Mhm.
marriage.
Right.
So it was an absolute shock to me that my mom sat my brother and me down and just said, your dad and I don't love each other anymore, and we're breaking up. And I don't remember if they said divorce because I remember I was like afraid to say divorce. I was like scared to like, it would jinx it or something. But she said, yeah, I'm gonna leave. So she had packed a suitcase and she got in her car. She drove away. And then my dad came home from work that night, and my brother and I, he's 3 years older than me, we had to tell our dad that she had left.
You are joking.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
So, yeah, I
gosh.
forgot to say that I grew up in Canada in a small town, and it was just my brother and me, and seemed like we had a pretty normal, like middle class life or whatever. That was in the 80s. And so really quite radical for that time is that my dad got custody of my brother and me. And I remember we were I don't really remember it happening, but I was told that it happened, that we had to go in and meet with some judge or some kind of lawyer and say who we wanted to live with. And we said that we wanted to stay with our dad because our mom had left, So we were like, we're not going to stay with her. And the other thing was that she had left my dad for somebody else. And so she moved in with this other guy. And so that was immediately like, well, we don't want to go be with him. We don't even
Right.
like, this is so wrong. We knew him, which is also quite sad. He was a family friend. Um, but we definitely didn't want to be around him. We wanted to stay with our dad. And so the way it worked was we would see them every other weekend. I think we would like go on a Friday or Saturday and stay till Sunday. So we'd stay a night or two at their house. And I never liked staying at their house because it just always felt weird and scary. My dad never remarried, so he was single until he died. And I'm really grateful for that. In the sense that growing up, I never felt like I was splitting his attention. I knew I had his attention and he was working and he had his own things he was dealing with, his own challenges, but I knew that I was a priority to him. My brother and I were a priority. And that really, I didn't realize what a gift that was until looking back and hearing some other people's stories.
It's crazy coming from a divorced family where my dad's the one who left, and
Mhm,
what's normalized in my brain is
mhm,
dads leave,
mhm,
right? And so to hear your
yeah,
mom left, and then to hear you were the ones who told your dad
mhm,
that she left,
yeah,
like it's just, I don't remember any,
mm,
I don't remember anybody sitting us down
mhm,
telling us, we're having problems, we're having issues.
mm,
I just remember one day my dad was gone.
yeah,
I remember one day he was back sitting at the bar stool one morning when I woke up and I was like, oh, he's back.
yeah,
And I was really happy about that. I just remember my mom explaining to me at one point, actually I have a core memory of I think it's a memory. I
mm,
think I remember one night when my dad was gone, my mom knowing where he was staying and
mm,
driving by where he was
mm,
staying after he left, and me being in the car with her because we
mm,
were young, right?
yeah,
She had to bring us. We
right,
were
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I was 4, and us driving by and her saying, oh, she's there with him or something. And, it planting these seeds in my heart
mm,
of whoever she is, I'm not to like her.
yeah,
And she's taken us from my mom. And my mom's story was, she knew there was nothing wrong.
mhm,
And my dad was a great dad and we were happy. And then all of a sudden, one day, he
yeah.
was like, I can't do this anymore. And then different things came out as I got older from my
Yeah.
dad. And I got a lot more from my mom growing up with her.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
yeah, we were kind of a maybe mid to upper class American family living in Alaska. We had the big, nice home, and my dad had his own business, and my mom stayed at home with us kids. At least you got we don't love each other
Yeah.
anymore and I'm leaving. I didn't get that. I don't remember my dad communicating anything, just remember him being gone. And then, similar to your dad, my mom never remarried. She didn't want us to go through things again, and she wanted to focus
Mhm.
on us. And she wanted to, I think, she always said protect us. And I think she wanted to protect herself too, because she was really
Mhm.
hurt
Oh,
big
yeah.
time.
Yeah. I can absolutely relate to that. My dad, when I think about him after the breakup and, being left by your wife, and I know he had a part to play in it, but
Yeah.
I just always felt like he really was a shadow of himself in some ways. Like he was an amazing dad and an amazing man in a lot of different ways, but definitely I think he probably didn't want to put himself through that. And it's interesting that you say about never getting told why. I think that's really common. A lot
Mhm.
of children of divorce I've talked to, they don't know why. Even now they're adults, they're 20, 30 years old, and they still don't really know why. They've never talked about it. They probably pieced a few things together. And I found it
Mhm.
really helpful to like over the years to get some of the details from my dad's perspective as well as my mom's
Yeah.
perspective. Because if you don't have the information, there's just this gap of like this huge
Yeah.
hole of like people just get married and then they just get divorced for no reason. And then that's to me, that's more terrifying because it's like,
Right.
I know if that's going to happen to me.
I had a lot of conversations with my dad that were about the divorce as we got older. So
Mm,
when I was 18, I was living overseas for 6 months, came home and decided I wanted to go back to Alaska. My mom and us kids had moved to Seattle when I was in high school. But after I was living in England for 6 months, I decided I was going to go back to Alaska for the summer. I was going to live with my dad. And I remember having some really um, they weren't long, but they were significant conversations.
mm,
I remember maybe it was an afternoon, I was folding towels with my stepmom, Vicky. She had made a comment, if we could go back and do things differently, we would. And I didn't cry. I didn't
yeah.
say, what would you do differently? Because I didn't want her to feel put on the spot. I remember my dad saying, just so you know, Amy, I didn't know Vicky when I left your mom. I met her afterwards.
Mm,
He wanted me to know that because I think
mhm.
he knew that that played
Yeah.
into the tension and the conflict that was there growing up with my mom. We have had some of those moments that have also been good in just helping understand and shift the
Mhm.
perspective because you only know what you're told and each
Mhm.
parent is telling it through
Yeah.
their side and their grid and their place in life.
Well, one of the questions, and you've touched on this a little bit, but that I'm always curious about is how did the divorce change your relationship with your parents? Now, you were very young, so you had, you know, not this super developed relationship with either parent. Let me say my thoughts and then give you a bit to think. Because I would say my relationship with my mom changed overnight. She was my primary caregiver. I was, a 10-year-old girl whose mom was there after school every day and, all that. To all of a sudden she's just not there and I don't see her and I'm afraid of her new husband and I feel so rejected. And so our relationship went from, I don't know if it was a 10, it went to like a 2, basically overnight. And it stayed there for probably 30 years or more. In retrospect, I've had to grieve that loss that I was a little girl and then a young woman and then a woman who didn't have a mother that she could go to or lean on or learn from or trust in and so on. My dad, on the other hand, I would say my relationship with him grew much closer, of course, because I think he, in that generation, is more of a hands-off, working full-time dad kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, here's this 10-year-old girl who needs affection and encouragement and affirmation and love and and then cared for. Like he had to care for me and buy me clothes and brush my hair and like all these practical things. And so my relationship with my dad definitely grew much stronger, much closer. Then as I grew older, I felt like I had to take care of my dad because there's no other woman in his life and he's
Right.
on his own and I'm taking his side and all these bad things have happened to him. So yeah. So any thoughts about you that you want to add to
Yeah,
your
I
relationship with your
mean,
parents?
yeah, similar and
Mhm.
different. So the
Mhm.
similarity would be I never doubted at all that I was loved. My mom made me feel loved. She
Mhm.
made me feel like I was the most beautiful girl
Mhm.
on the earth, and I was like God's gift to the earth, right? So she was queen of affirmation and physical hugs and affection, support. And she would do anything for us. And she did do anything for us. I was 4, so I was at a very different place developmentally than you at 10. I remember not having much of a relationship with my dad. And I remember because my mom was so angry. She
Mhm.
was angry, she was hurt, she was bitter. It was messy. I remember wanting to not cause her any more pain. And what
Mhm.
would cause her pain would be a relationship with my dad because that was broken with
Absolutely.
her and me interpreting why Why would I want relationship with a man who hurt my mom so bad and broke up our family? So I felt I needed to not do that as a way to show my love for my mom. So I didn't have much of a relationship with my dad. I think he did what he could do in the situation because it was difficult from my mom. And my mom, she was a great mom. She had a lot on her plate with four of us kids, so young at home, working full time, raising us. I mean, all four of us were constantly in t-ball and baseball and softball at the same time. I did jazz, acrobatics, ballet. And she made all of this happen really without him. So I don't ever remember him taking us to any sports or showing up at any games. And he probably didn't even know, right? Because the last thing my mom was going to do was going to be to call him and talk to him about that. So I didn't have much of a relationship with him. I do remember this moment when my mom just lost it. Like it became too much. And she snapped one night and was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. I can't do it. And she called my dad. And I remember, loud conversation about you need to come and get them. I need a break. I just
Yeah.
remember
Mm.
him showing up and my mom telling us to pack a bag. We were going to go stay with my dad for a while. As a young child who was probably in the second grade,
Mm.
um, packing her own bag to
Mhm.
go with
Mhm.
clothes that were too small and that didn't work and all of that, and going to my dad's. And then I remember for the first time in my life, he picked me up from the babysitters after school. It was the first time, and I remember he showed up at the door, and I was so excited to see him. This was my natural, unhindered response. And I ran up to him and I jumped into his arms, and I'm like, "Hi, Dad!" And then I remembered, I remembered this felt like disloyalty to my mom, and so I backed off. Yeah. And so, but that was the cry of 7-year-old, 8-year-old Amy's heart. We stayed with him for a little bit. It wasn't long. And then we went back home to my mom's. But there wasn't a whole lot of relationship there. I think he thought there was more relationship there because
Mhm.
when the times we did spend with him, they had a couple small yachts that they would take out around Alaska, and we'd go out with them, and they had a Zodiac that they'd pull behind the yacht, and us kids would get to take out and drive the Zodiac around the Alaskan waters, and we'd go fishing and pitch a tent, and we went skiing, on some of the weekends in Alaska. A little uncomfortable going to his house too. So they had built a really nice, beautiful home, 3-story big home for them. We would go there, yet we didn't have permanent rooms. They had 2 rooms in the basements with just kind of like bed and a comforter on it and a dresser
Mhm.
and nothing personal of ours. And then there was a room downstairs where if we wanted to watch TV, it kind of felt like we would be sent to the basement to
Mhm.
watch TV. So it always felt just not natural
Yeah.
because we didn't have a place of belonging there. We
Mhm.
were guests for the weekend. And so, they did
Mhm.
create some memories in there, but they were far less than I would have liked. And it felt uncomfortable because of everything that had happened.
I can totally relate to the not having a place of my own at my mom's house. So yeah, in all of the years that we were going back and forth every weekend, I never had a bedroom that was mine that I could, I never had stuff that I kept there. And I'm trying to remember packing a suitcase because I must have packed a suitcase every other weekend because I definitely didn't leave things there, to use from week to week. I always felt like I was a visitor and I never quite knew what the rules were. We got yelled at a lot in that home. So I was always on edge. Like, what am I going to do wrong now? What am I going to get yelled at now? Didn't have words for it then, but just that anxiety of like, I don't know what's expected. I don't like being here. I can't tell anybody. I was having to carry that on my own. And my brother is 3 years older than me, and we would always go together. So there was definitely like moral support in that, but we never talked about it or like,
Right.
get out of this, or when this happens, can you do this for me? Like we didn't. really tag team it. And looking back, you don't know, you don't know. You're just a little kid trying to get through, but
Yeah, you don't even have I think, the mental capacity at that place to realize what you should be thinking. And looking back, like I'm surprised to hear that your mom didn't have a place for you because she was your main caregiver.
Mhm.
So when I look at my situation with my dad, I look at Vicky, who never had kids of her
Sure.
own,
Mhm.
and my dad, who worked and wasn't the stay-at-home parent. So I kind of give them a little bit of
Mm.
grace there, just going, I don't think they knew. They weren't even thinking through what would make this feel good for them. Or maybe they were thinking, we want them to know that their place is with their mom and we don't want to
Mm.
take away from that.
Sure. Yeah.
You
Mhm.
just don't know. That
Yeah.
would be the
No, definitely not.
higher, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
road to think of.
Yeah.
I never even realized that until looking back. I didn't have a place there.
Mhm. But maybe let's just pause here for a second, Amy, and debrief a little bit. Like, what is it like talking to somebody about this? But yeah, and for
You know,
anybody listening and is kind of like, ooh, maybe should I do this with a friend? Like, how has it been for you so far?
I think it's really interesting to talk to you to learn, just to learn about your story and to
Mhm.
learn, because all of these things shape us, right? They
Yeah.
shape our struggles, they shape our strengths. As I was reading through the questions before that you sent, I was like,
Mm.
okay, well, I think this actually created this in me, which I'm
Sure.
really proud of. It's also not so uncommon for me to talk about it because my husband Darren comes from a divorced family.
Okay.
We have a lot in common,
Yeah.
and so we talk a lot about that, especially as we have been so intentional with our own family and our own marriage
Mm.
because of where we've come from, wanting to do it differently and have it look differently and feel differently and function differently. But I'm enjoying like just the
Mm.
reflection process
Mhm.
with you.
Mhm.
And I have tried to grow through it and heal, be a more whole person. How about you? How do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
feel?
Well, just to say, it's beautiful to hear that you've been able to talk through so much with Darren in particular, but because I think what's common for children of divorce is just this feeling of being alone. Secrets we're trying to keep, we're trying to protect our mom or our dad
Yeah,
or our siblings, or we're afraid to be
yeah,
vulnerable. I'm enjoying this as well, learning about you. And as you're saying stuff, I keep saying, oh, yeah, that
yeah,
reminds me.
yeah,
So even though
yeah.
our stories are quite different,
Mhm.
I'm finding it, yeah, enjoyable is that the right word? But it's helpful, it's encouraging, and it's also not as scary as maybe I think it might be to talk to somebody else because when I say, oh yeah, my stepdad or whatever, you're like, you're not like, oh, what is that? Like I'm being met with a lot of understanding and nods and compassion, connection, which is really helpful in sharing a story. So that's
Yeah, totally. I
cool.
agree.
Let's move on then. Thank you for that. How did you kind of cope with the breakup during your childhood and teenage years? Which even as I'm asking the question, I realize it's a difficult question to answer because I think at the time, this is my experience, at the time, I don't know that I'm coping. I'm just living my life,
Exactly. It's
right?
exactly.
It's only in retrospect that I go, whoa, I was absolutely doing that behavior or that activity as a way to cope or as a way to process my pain or as a way to avoid my things. So I don't know. Do you want to give that one a go?
I thought as a 4-year-old, you're just living.
Right.
You don't know you're coping. You don't know anything. You're just
Yeah.
living and you're being, told things. And if I look at coping as far as impact, how did it
Mm.
impact me?
Sure.
Coped by having a strong bond with my mom.
Mhm.
By my dad wasn't around, but my mom's dad, my grandpa, he was. My grandparents, they lived just a couple miles from us, and he was very present. So he would take us skiing after church. We would wear our ski clothes to church sometimes and go skiing. He was, if I wanted to go to the fair and my mom couldn't take me or wouldn't take me, I'd call up my grandpa and he'd
Mm.
be like, okay, honey, I'll come and get you
Yeah,
and
nice.
we'll go
Nice.
to the fair. Maybe I got good at figuring out how to meet my needs.
Wow, I want to write that down.
So my mom couldn't meet all my needs.
Yeah.
My dad couldn't meet all my needs because he wasn't there living with us
Mm.
and he was building life and a relationship with his wife. But my grandparents, they met a lot of our needs. So when I was sick with cancer, my grandmother would come over and rub my back and put a heating pad on my stomach and help support my mom in the process. And I coped with family support, especially
Mhm.
grandparents, and they were so important to
Mhm.
me. I think I learned how to meet different needs
Mhm.
because I didn't have two parents looking out for them and anticipating. I had a mom who was super committed and involved, but she had four kids and was on her own.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to figure out how to do things. And I became very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
my mom worked and I knew that she'd come home tired from being with kids all day and then she
Yeah.
came home to kids. And so I knew what would make her um, more at ease and not so stressed would be to come home to a cleaner house
Yeah.
and to come home to have, dinner preparations going. So I would, help make dinner, figuring out those things I could do to also meet the needs around me.
Yeah. Hearing kind of two things in your answer. One is on a practical things, like what did you do to kind of survive, or what did you do to help your mom and to help your family function?
Mhm.
So I'm hearing that, and I can absolutely relate to that. And then the other one was about like your emotional needs and your like finding problem solving, finding ways to get your needs met. I thought that was really profound. Some things I would add to that in terms of my coping,
Yeah.
finding places where I could get the affirmation and the attention that I craved. So for me, that
Mm.
was school, being good at school, academically, a small town, there wasn't a lot of other things going on. So, but
Mhm.
thankfully for me, I was good in school. And so I always
Yeah.
knew that when I went to school, if I did my homework and paid attention in class, that I would get the teacher's
Wow.
affirmation and then the respect of the my peers and things like that.
Yeah.
It was like, I want attention. I need people to see me and care about me and think I'm important and I have things to offer. And so I found that in school. Sort of the shadow side is I learned how to please people. So I learned how to kind of shrink myself, my personality, my interests, my preferences, and be like, well, what do you want to do? No, I don't care. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go with my friends and with basically anybody in my life? I coped by, yeah, shrinking down,
Mm.
trying to be a chameleon so that I could get the love that I
Interesting.
longed for. I think I can definitely see that pattern of relating and trying to like get love through pleasing people is definitely still active in my life.
Mm. Like I'm wondering about, excuse me, one of the big things in my childhood is I was this little entrepreneur.
Mm,
And like from the time I was probably 8 or 9, I was walking our neighborhood asking for odd jobs to earn money,
okay.
getting jobs for lawn mowing jobs, and then my brother mowing the yard, but me getting money because I got the job, or
Yeah.
babysitting, or you name it. And
Yeah.
I actually was super successful at it. I would make big money as a
Okay.
little kid
Yeah.
and had just this jar filled with money.
Yeah.
I wonder, some of that just might be in my DNA and how I was
Mm,
made. But some of it also might have been a coping thing where I didn't struggle for the affirmation of feeling loved and accepted and all of that because I was just smothered with it by my
mm,
mom. My daughter would say, like, Mom, it's too
yeah.
much.
Yeah.
But for me, with the money thing, I think it was my way of like earning money to have my own means to do things. So I think that was another way I survived. If I wanted the extra and I wanted the means, then figuring out how to get it.
Yeah.
And it kind of, that trait I'm proud of because now today,
Mm-hmm.
like, being self-employed, I have to figure out
Yeah.
how to get what I need
Yes.
to survive.
And it's interesting that, you're saying about what is DNA and what's was a result of the divorce and things. Because I
Yes.
can also identify with that. My coping was I got to organize and I got to plan. And I'm a good organizer and I'm a good planner. And I probably would have already been, even if my parents
Yeah.
didn't divorce. But I can see how that brought me a sense of stability and security. And the like,
Yeah.
at least I can control my daytimer and at least I can control my
Yeah.
wardrobe, as an 8-year-old or whatever, a 12-year-old or a
Yeah.
16-year-old. Yeah. So what's curious to me, and we don't have time to talk about it today, but like,
Yeah.
kind of what are the messages below that? Like you're saying, I want to be able to take care of myself. I wanted to be in control of something because I felt out of control or I felt like I
Right,
didn't have a
right,
say in certain things. I didn't have that. I can just relax and trust that my parents are going to take care of me because I'm a 12-year-old. It's like,
right,
no, I've got to figure it out, and not
right.
like, and I think I see that in a lot of children of
I
divorce,
know,
that it doesn't
right?
match our level of responsibility. Like at what age you are, you're cooking dinner. I know a lot of adults who don't want to cook dinner. They want somebody else to do it for them. So
I know. I look
I,
at my kids. I look at my kids now. We just sent Logan off to college, and he can make a protein shake and coffee and popcorn, and
yeah.
he can barely make a sandwich.
I know. I'm
Like,
like, I was setting my alarm clock, my clock radio when I was 10 years old and getting myself up and making my lunch and packing my thing and
right,
to get to
right,
the bus. And nobody was
right.
telling me what to do. I had to do it on my own. My
Oh,
friends whose
I
parents were
know.
married didn't do all of those things.
I
Their mom would
know.
make their lunch for them and pick them up from
I
school and cook
know.
the dinner, or their
I
dad or
know.
whoever. But
Yeah, and if we didn't make our lunch, we just didn't have a lunch.
yeah, exactly. If you didn't do your laundry, there was no clean clothes. And those
Goodness.
lessons absolutely have done me well. But
Yeah,
I don't know that I learned them in the right time for the right reason. And
right,
that's the
right.
thing, with when you have
Yeah,
to learn something.
I
Okay, I
know.
think maybe let's move on to the exciting one about relationships and marriage. We're both married. For me, that's quite a miracle because I've been married for 4 years. But what I'm wanting us to chat about a little bit is from this perspective and our age, right, both married, how would you say that your parents' divorce impacted your view, not just of marriage, but of relationships, love, vulnerability? What do you notice about that, or what do you think about that?
I'll tell you, you said it's a miracle you're married. It was a flippin' miracle I got
Mm.
married. I was so afraid of relationships, Tanya. Probably the only reason Darren and I got married is when we had had significant conversation, him sharing that he was really interested in me and wanted to pursue a relationship, like a serious relationship.
Uh-huh.
And I was living overseas and he asked, to take me to the airport. And I was like, no, no, thanks. My mom will take me.
Uh-huh.
I was just, so self-protection mode. This thing that I thought was truth of protect your heart, because basically you can get hurt when you love, you can get hurt. That's the
Mhm.
reality. I told my mom after we'd come home, I had come home and said, okay, something's happening and I really like him and he likes me. And this is what our conversation was like. And he asked to take me to the airport, but I said, you were going to take me. And she goes, Amy Lee Honshin, you quit running and you let that boy take you to the airport. I looked at her and I said, okay. And
Mm.
I got up and I called him and I said, Darren, my mom can still take me to the airport, but I would like it if you were the one to take me to the airport. I mean, we've been married 22 years next
Mhm.
week,
Okay.
and we didn't get married until I was 29. I was really afraid of relationships. I wanted a relationship.
Mhm.
I wasn't one of those girls who's like, I don't ever want to get married. I wanted a
Yeah.
relationship. I wanted to be married, but I was so scared of it because my mom's, story to me was she thought she was happily married and my dad was a really good dad.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden he comes out and says he's going to leave,
Mhm.
that this isn't working for him. I thought, my gosh, if a really good marriage, as a wife, you think you're in a good marriage and you've got 4 kids, and all of a sudden your husband leaves you. How can you trust in marriage and love? Because I didn't want to get hurt, but I didn't want to have kids
Mhm.
that got hurt and got dragged through it because it was really hard. And then there was this complication of I wasn't raised with my mom and dad. I was just raised with my mom by the age of 4. And I didn't see a healthy,
Mhm.
normal marriage before me 24/7.
Yeah.
I saw other marriages, but they weren't my parents. For me, I didn't have that. And I was scared. I didn't know how to get that. I didn't know if it would last. I didn't know if I chose the wrong person, if he would break it. I can't trust myself in that. It wasn't just I couldn't trust men.
Mhm.
but I just couldn't trust that marriage could work for me because it didn't work for my mom. I didn't know how to do it, quite honestly. I
Mhm.
didn't know what getting into a relationship looked like. And I grew up in the church that was quite conservative and like it didn't even encourage dating. So there wasn't even this healthy model there of this is
Mhm.
how you get to know somebody and how you date and
Mhm.
all of that.
Yeah.
So it was just all kind of missing for me.
Mhm.
And so it impacted me with a lot of fear and uncertainty. Talking to a really good friend of mine who I was living with, Maureen. And I remember asking her, once we'd gotten together and we'd gotten engaged and going, how, how is this gonna, how is this gonna work? How can I trust in this? And she was like, Amy, just ways you trusted in him for this and then for this, you trust in the same way. And it was some of the best advice I'd gotten about marriage was from a single woman, and which was really cool. I'm so glad that I faced my fear. I didn't get married free of fear. I got married scared.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I got scared that he was going to break up with me before the wedding. I
Mhm.
got scared that, we had this destination wedding in Hawaii, and I was afraid, that something was going to happen and it just wasn't going to work out and everybody was going to be there. I mean, all these irrational fears from
Yeah,
when you're in
sure.
a good relationship. And then I went into marriage. Honestly, I feel like I should stand up so you can see my body, but I went into marriage like, bracing myself.
Mhm.
Just went in with my head down, so ready for it. And I was joking with Darren this morning. I'm like, maybe it'll hit in year number 23 because it never really hit, right? I
Oh,
think because I
wow.
was so
Yeah.
overly cautious and afraid, I had to walk afraid
Mhm.
because I wanted it. It was hard for me because I hadn't experienced good marriage in front of me with my parents. It wasn't modeled to me, so I had to um, trust in God and trust in ourselves that we would be able to do this. It is probably the thing I am most proud of in my life.
Yeah.
I am so proud
Yeah.
of the family we have created.
Beautiful to hear. It's beautiful to see you getting emotional, just as you reflect on how hard it was to overcome that fear and
Yep,
and
yep,
how faithfully, as Maureen
yep.
suggested, just every day you're just like trying to figure it out. Like you, I just thought love doesn't work. Love is not trustworthy, and
Mm.
everybody who says they love me is lying to me. And so I was just really not interested. I thought I do not want to make myself vulnerable in that way. And like you, I can relate to I didn't have an example, so I didn't know how do you even date? How do you flirt? How do you communicate? How do you argue? How do you prepare after
Exactly.
an argument? All these practical things that
Yep.
uh, people who my husband is from an intact family and will often have conversations. I'm like, how do you just know how to? It's not fair that you just know how to do that because you watched your parents doing it your whole life. I've had people in my life who were married who let
Yeah.
me see
Yeah.
what the behind the scenes, of like,
Right.
okay, we don't always get along and it's not a fairy tale and you don't just pray really hard and everything works out perfectly. Like to see
Mhm.
the nuts and bolts, I'm grateful because if I hadn't had different families, couples in my life who let me spend time in their home,
Yeah,
to know them in a
totally.
deep way, I'd probably still be single, and that's not the worst thing ever. But
Yeah.
I think you got to learn it from somewhere. If you don't learn it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And I mean, that's true as I reflect on my friendships and relationships too. One of the big influences are friends of mine, Holger and Jilly, and we lived in different places together all over the world, and we're really close.
Mm.
Watching them in their marriage and in their parenting and stuff, that was a gift to me. And I think that is kind of also what gives you hope in the midst of your own story of your parents,
Mhm.
marriage not working out, but seeing there are others that do
Mhm.
work out.
Do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap?
Yeah.
I always ask children of divorce this, adult children of divorce this. People are getting divorced all the time. And probably all of us who are listening to this know families who are divorced. We have kids in our lives, whether that's nieces and nephews, neighbors, friends, whatever. But what can we do to help children whose parents are divorced, whether that happened last week or 10 years ago? Like, what do kids need? What can we offer them? Just trying to bring it on the radar of people who are from intact families who may not understand the way that we do, what that feels like. Even me, I often look helplessly at families who are divorced or divorcing and want to do more to help the kids. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. What would you suggest? What can help kids? How can others help kids?
The biggest thought that I had reflecting on this question, as somebody who came from divorce at 4, is I don't feel like I had any say or
Mhm.
any choices. As a mom who's now raised 4 kids,
Yeah.
I cannot imagine our kids not having a voice and choice
Mhm.
in divorce. And I know you can't always choose things when
Mhm.
things break and you're just trying to survive. But the thing we both talked about is not really having it talked about with our parents, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I wasn't ever asked at any point where I wanted to live. I wasn't ever asked at any point, do I like the situation of how things are
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
visitation? My life had changed and what I wanted. Children are real people
Mhm.
and they are young and they still have rights. They deserve a voice more
Mhm.
than anything.
Yeah.
They are the vulnerable ones.
Yeah.
As society navigates divorce, whether it's the parents and the greater family navigating that. I know sometimes parents don't have presence of mind and they're too hurting to engage with their kids, but that's the gift of families. We
Mhm.
have aunts, we have uncles, we have grandparents, we have, you know, adoptive grandparents, we have people who are close to families generally
Mhm.
who can help with that, I think. We need to see kids as real people and they don't know what they don't know and they don't know what they should be asking or even thinking about. One of the biggest things we could do to make the divorce situation better
Mhm.
is to have conversations with them
Yeah.
and processes to help with that.
No, that's beautiful because what I wrote down here in my notes is just really beautiful to hear your passion for children or people and they deserve their rights and they deserve a say. But what I wrote down was don't for all of the people who are listening who are looking at the kids in their life is don't be afraid to talk to them about it. By the time we know about it, the divorce is done. The decision has
Yeah,
been made, right? By the time the general
right.
public realize that Joe and Sally are
The
splitting up.
train has left.
Right.
Right,
So it's not the time to go in and say, can we work it out? Right. So it's already happened. And so I think the common view is like, well, just help the kids move on with it and just pretend like it didn't happen. It's no big deal. And
right.
or this type of thing I can relate to. Nobody ever asked, talk to me about it, not even asking my opinion about things that couldn't change. I don't know how I would have responded if I had an auntie or a cousin or a neighbor or somebody from church who just like took me out for coffee once a year and said, Tanya, let's just talk about your life. How are you feeling about your parents and your family and how are you feeling about life? The adults in my life didn't really show up. I think they were just trying to keep hands off. They were trying not to get involved. So that left me feeling even more isolated and
Mhm.
where I wonder how different my life might have been if there were some people in my life who were like,
Mhm.
okay, I will show up for you, whether it's coming to your football games,
Mhm.
coming to your graduation ceremony every year, or buying you a book and talking about it every 3 months, or like who are intentional to like
Mhm.
care about me as a person. Not necessarily related to the divorce, but I think having that consistency in your life of somebody who's not a parent, you lose that when your parents split up because your parents are usually too distracted, too busy, life's crazy. And so who's like the safe person that just has
Mhm.
time for you? So I'm thinking it's a big thing is about having time for children and teens and even young adults, not only focused about the divorce, but having that in the back of your mind going, this is probably a child who could use some parental attention and who's gone through a
Mhm.
lot of grief and doesn't know how to process it and is afraid to talk about it and doesn't feel heard and doesn't have choices. So what could I do to give them space to feel heard,
Mhm.
to have a say? This is my great brainstorm.
Back to your comment of not having the aunties involved and all of that, when divorce happened in my family, I kind of lost my dad's side. I didn't find them again until I was 18, and then both of my grandparents had passed on his side, which was so sad that I never had relationship with them. Of course, awkwardness, like with my aunt who was on my dad's side, and I'm living with my mom. So it's usually like I think it can usually be the other side that you're not living with feels awkward, and overcoming that awkwardness with the ex-spouse and that awkwardness of crossing the family line to say, hey, this marriage may have ended and maybe it really needed to end. I'm still here and still want to be a part of your life.
I think that's a good point for relatives. So anybody who's experienced a divorce
Yeah,
in their family is like, you're the adult. It's up to you to pursue the child. You can't wait for the
yeah,
child to say, Auntie, can I
yeah,
come visit you? Grandma, can I,
yeah.
you know, as
You,
an
yeah,
adult,
you,
please pursue the kid and like
yeah,
send them
make
the
the
birthday
phone
cards
call.
and yeah, give them the
Yes,
phone call, do the thing. Like,
go visit, take them
yeah,
to the zoo,
yeah, like get over
show
your
up.
awkwardness and think
Yeah,
about the kid, please. So yeah.
maybe overcompensate, like
Mm,
more than you would have done if the
yeah.
family was intact.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
good
you
point.
have
Yep.
to,
Mhm.
like you have to go that extra mile because you can't expect the kid to, and you can't expect that parent that you're not related to unless you have still remained really close or whatever.
Hey, well, I think we'll wrap this up here. And thanks for the chat, Amy. That was great. I'm gonna end the video here.